I was dying on a cold hospital gurney while my family popped champagne bottles. The paramedic held the phone to my ear, and I heard the music blasting in the background. I heard the laughter. I heard my own daughter say that cutting the cake was more important than my failing heart. They thought I was just an old man crying for attention. They thought I would be there the next morning to pay the bills and fix the mess. They were wrong. 7 days later, they finally showed up at my hospital room, but they did not find me. They found an empty bed and a single handwritten note. When my son-in-law read that note, his arrogant smile vanished. His face went pale. That was the moment they realized the bank of Dad was closed forever. My name is Lincoln, and at 68 years old, I have learned that the sharpest knife in the world is not made of steel, but of betrayal. I spent 40 years in the construction business in Atlanta. My hands are rough. My skin is weathered from the Georgia sun. Every callus on my fingers represents a brick I laid, or a foundation I poured to build a life for my wife Lucille and our children. I built skyscrapers. I built shopping centers. I built the very mansion my family was standing in last Saturday night. But to them, I was just a walking checkbook in a cheap suit. The disrespect did not start the night of the party, but that was the night it finally broke me. It was supposed to be a celebration for my son-in-law, Brent. He had just been promoted at his investment firm. The party was held at the Blue Ridge Estate. It is a 5,000 square foot property with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I bought that house. I paid for the renovations. I paid for the landscaping. But the deed is in my daughter Kendra's name because I wanted her to feel secure. That was my first mistake. I arrived at the estate 15 minutes early. I parked my 1990 Ford pickup truck around the back so it would not offend the guests. I walked into the kitchen wearing my best navy blue suit. It was 10 years old, but it was clean and pressed. I felt proud. I was ready to shake Brent's hand and tell him I was happy for his success. Lucille was the first one to see me. She did not hug me. She did not smile. She looked at my shoes and frowned. She was wearing a silk gown that cost $3,000. I paid the credit card bill for it 2 weeks ago. She walked over to me and adjusted my tie with a sharp yank. "Lincoln, why are you wearing that dinosaur of a suit?" she hissed. "You look like you are going to a funeral, not a gala." I tried to smile. "It is my Sunday best, Lucille. I polished the shoes myself." Brent walked in then. He held a glass of scotch in one hand and checked his expensive watch with the other. He is a tall white man with a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. He looked me up and down with open disgust. "We cannot have him mingling with the partners looking like that," Brent said to Lucille, as if I was not standing right there. "He looks like the help. Actually, the caterers are dressed better." I felt a tightening in my chest, but I ignored it. I thought it was just the stress. I spoke up. "Brent, I can stay in the den if you prefer. I just wanted to congratulate you." Brent laughed. It was a dry, cold sound. "No, Lincoln. You will not stay in the den. The partners will be using the den for cigars later. You need to stay in the kitchen. Or better yet, go sit in the sunroom at the back. If anyone asks, just say you are overseeing the facilities." Lucille nodded in agreement. "Please, Lincoln, do not embarrass Kendra. She has worked so hard to cultivate this image. Just stay out of sight until the important guests leave. Grab a plate of food and stay in the back." They turned their backs on me. They walked out into the grand hallway to greet the first arrivals. I stood alone in the kitchen of the house I paid for. The catering staff looked at me with pity. A young waiter offered me a glass of water, but I shook my head. The tightening in my chest was getting worse. It felt like an iron band was being cranked tighter and tighter around my ribs. I walked over to the granite island to steady myself. I could hear the party starting in the other room. I heard the string quartet start playing. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard Brent's booming voice telling a joke and the roar of appreciative laughter. I was the ghost in my own life. I tried to pour myself a glass of water from the pitcher on the counter. My left arm felt heavy. It felt numb. My fingers refused to grip the glass. I knocked into a stack of serving platters. These were antique porcelain plates that Lucille had imported from France. The crash was deafening. One of the large platters shattered into a dozen pieces on the tile floor. The music in the other room did not stop, but the door to the kitchen swung open instantly. Lucille rushed in. She did not look at my face. She did not see the sweat beading on my forehead. She did not see that my lips were turning gray. Her eyes went straight to the broken porcelain on the floor. She screamed, "Are you insane, Lincoln? Do you know how much that cost? That is Limoges porcelain. You clumsy old fool." I gasped for air. I clutched the edge of the counter. Lucille, my chest. She was on her knees picking up the shards. She looked up at me with pure venom in her eyes. "Stop it. Do not dare try to play the victim right now. You are always doing this. You break things, and then you pretend you are sick, so we feel bad for you. It is pathetic." She stood up, holding a sharp piece of the plate. "Get out. Just go out the back door and go home. You have ruined enough for one night." I tried to take a step toward her. The pain hit me like a sledgehammer. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the cold tiles right next to the broken plate. My vision started to tunnel. I saw the young waiter drop his tray and run toward me. I saw him pull out his phone. "Sir, can you hear me?" the waiter shouted. "Call 911. Lucille stood over me. She did not kneel down. She dusted off her dress. She looked annoyed. "He is fine," she told the waiter. "He is just dramatic. Get him some water and help him to his truck." The waiter ignored her. He was shouting into his phone. "We have a male roughly 70 years old, possible cardiac arrest. He is going unconscious." Only then did I see a flicker of uncertainty in Lucille's eyes, but she did not hold my hand. She looked at the kitchen door, terrified that a guest might walk in and see the commotion. "Keep your voice down," she hissed at the waiter. "Close the door." The next few minutes were a blur of flashing lights and distant voices. I remember the paramedics bursting through the service entrance. They were professional. They moved fast. They cut open my shirt. They put pads on my chest. I was lifted onto the gurney. As they wheeled me out, I looked for Lucille. She was not coming with me. She was standing by the door, blocking the view so the guests in the living room would not see. "I will call you," she mouthed, but she was already turning back to the mirror to fix her hair. I was in the back of the ambulance. The siren was wailing. The paramedic was a young man with kind eyes. He was checking my vitals. "Sir, we are losing your pressure," he said. "Is there family we can contact? We need to let them know which hospital we are going to." I nodded weakly. "My daughter, Kendra." He took my phone from my pocket. He unlocked it with my Face ID. He dialed Kendra. He put it on speaker so I could hear. The phone rang 3 times. Then she picked up. The background noise was loud. People were laughing. "Hello?" Kendra shouted. "Who is this?" "This is the Fulton County Paramedic Service, ma'am," the medic said. "We have your father Lincoln here. He has suffered a massive heart attack. We are transporting him to St. Joseph's Hospital. It is critical. You need to come now." There was a pause. I heard Brent's voice in the background asking who it was. "Oh my God," Kendra groaned. "Is he doing the chest-clutching thing again? Look, he just broke a plate and Mom yelled at him. He is embarrassed. He is fine." "Ma'am, his vitals are unstable," the medic said, his voice firm. "This is not a drill. He could die." I heard the sound of a spoon tapping on a glass. It was time for the speeches. "Look, we are right in the middle of the toasts," Kendra said. "Brent is about to cut the cake. We cannot leave right now. It would ruin the whole flow of the party. Just give him some oxygen and tell him to sleep it off. We will stop by tomorrow or something." "But ma'am," the medic started. "Stop calling me," Kendra snapped. "If he is really sick, use his insurance card. It is in his wallet. Do not bill us." The line went dead. The ambulance was silent, except for the beep of the heart monitor. The young medic looked at me. He looked heartbroken. He slowly lowered the phone. "I am so sorry, sir," he whispered. I stared up at the metal ceiling of the ambulance. The pain in my chest was still there, but suddenly it felt different. The crushing weight was gone. It was replaced by a cold, empty void. For 40 years, I had given them everything. I worked double shifts in the rain. I missed my own birthday dinners to fix their leaking roofs. I paid for colleges I never got to attend. I paid for weddings where I was treated like a guest. I paid for the very cake they were cutting right now, while I died in the back of a van. A single tear rolled down the side of my face and soaked into the pillow. It was the last tear I would ever shed for them. The monitor started beeping faster. My vision began to fade to black. I looked at the medic. "Do not call them back," I whispered. My voice was raspy but steady. "Sir, we have to notify family." "No," I said. "I do not have a family. Not anymore." I closed my eyes. The darkness took me. I did not know if I would wake up, but I knew one thing for sure. If I did wake up, Lincoln, the provider, was dead. The man who woke up would be someone they had never met before, and he would not be paying for the cake. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor. It was a cold and mechanical sound that measured the seconds of a life my family did not care to save. I opened my eyes. The lights were dim. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I tried to move my arm, but it was heavy. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. I looked to the left. The visitor chair was empty. I looked to the right. The bedside table was bare. There were no flowers. There were no cards. There was not even a half-drunk cup of coffee to suggest that someone had been there and just stepped out. I looked at the digital clock on the wall. It had been 3 days since the surgery, 72 hours. I lay there, and the silence pressed down on my chest heavier than the surgery scars. My mind drifted back to 1995. Kendra was 12 years old and had appendicitis. I spent 4 nights sleeping in a plastic chair next to her bed. My back screamed in pain, but I held her hand every time she woke up crying. I remembered Tyrell breaking his leg during football practice. I carried him up and down the stairs for 6 weeks. I remembered sitting with Lucille through her hysterectomy. I wiped her forehead. I fed her ice chips. I told her she was beautiful when she felt broken. I was always there. I was the rock. I was the anchor. Now the anchor was sinking, and the ship had sailed on without me. A nurse walked in. She was a heavy-set woman with a kind face. She checked my IV bag. She looked at the empty room and then she looked at me. Her eyes held a softness that hurt more than cruelty. "Mr. Lincoln," she said softly, "it is good to see you awake. You gave us quite a scare." I tried to speak. My voice was a rusty croak. "Did anyone call?" She hesitated. She checked the chart at the foot of my bed. She adjusted my blanket. She did not want to answer. "Your wife called the first night to authorize the billing," she said. "She asked if the insurance covered a private room. When we said it did, she hung up." I closed my eyes. She did not ask if I was alive. She asked about the money. "Can I get you anything?" the nurse asked. "My phone," I whispered. She handed me my smartphone from the drawer. It felt cold in my hand. I waited for her to leave the room. I needed to be alone for what came next. I unlocked the screen. No missed calls, no text messages, just a notification from the weather app saying it was sunny in Atlanta. My thumb hovered over the contacts icon, but I did not tap it. Instead, I opened an app that I had hidden in a folder named Utilities. It was the control center for the security cameras I had installed at the Blue Ridge estate 3 months ago. I never told them about it. They thought I was an old man who could barely use a remote control. They did not know I understood technology better than they understood hard work. The video feed loaded. The image was crisp and clear in high definition. I selected the camera for the living room. What I saw made the blood freeze in my veins. They were there. All of them. It was the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday. They should have been at work. They should have been at the hospital. Instead, they were sitting in my living room drinking my vintage wine. I turned up the volume on my phone. The sound of their voices filled my lonely hospital room. "I honestly feel relieved," Brent was saying. He was sprawling on the leather sofa with his feet up on the coffee table. He was wearing one of my silk robes. It is so quiet without him shuffling around and complaining about the lights being left on. Lucille was sitting in her favorite armchair. She was holding a glass of Chardonnay. She looked relaxed. She looked happier than she had looked in years. "Do not be mean, Brent," she said, but there was no bite in her tone. "He is just difficult. He has always been difficult. But I agree. It is nice to breathe. I feel like I can finally relax in my own house." "Your house," Brent corrected her. "It is Kendra's name on the deed, but it is your house, Mom. And once he is gone, it will really be yours." I zoomed in on the image. Kendra was sitting on the floor counting cash. It was the emergency cash I kept in the safe in my study. They had cracked my safe. "So what is the plan?" Kendra asked. "The doctor said he might pull through. If he comes back here, it is going to be a nightmare. He is going to need care. He is going to need help walking. I cannot deal with that. I have a life. I have yoga. I have brunch. I cannot be changing bedpans for an old man who hates me." Brent sat up. He took a sip of my wine. "I have been looking into options. There is a facility called Shady Pines on the outskirts of the city. It is state-funded. It is not pretty, but it is functional." Lucille frowned. "Is it clean?" Does it matter? Brent laughed. He will not know the difference. We can tell him it is a rehabilitation luxury resort. By the time he realizes it is a dumping ground for the indigent, he will be too medicated to complain. We can use his pension checks to pay for the upgrade to a room with a window. The rest of the money stays here, with us, where it belongs. Lucille took a long sip of wine. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the expensive art on the walls. She looked at the life I had built for her. I suppose it is for the best, she said. I have taken care of him for 40 years. I deserve a break. I deserve to enjoy my golden years without a burden. A burden. The word hung in the air. The woman I had loved since I was 20 years old called me a burden. The man I treated like a son wanted to dump me in a state facility. The daughter I raised like a princess was stealing my cash while I lay in a hospital bed. I watched them for another minute. They were laughing now. They were planning a vacation to Cabo with the money they thought they would save. They were dividing up my watch collection. They were already erasing me. I closed the app. My hand was shaking, but not from weakness. It was shaking from rage. The sorrow I felt earlier was gone. It had been burned away by a cold, white-hot fury. They wanted the money. They wanted the house. They wanted the freedom. They were going to get exactly what they deserved. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Zhao. He answered on the first ring. Lincoln Zhao's voice was filled with panic. Thank God. I have been trying to call the hospital, but they would not release information to non-family members. I went to the house, but Brent told me you did not want to see anyone. I knew he was lying. I was about to drive down there and break the door down myself. How are you, my friend? I took a deep breath. The pain in my chest was still there, but I shoved it aside. I sat up straighter in the bed. I am done, Zhao, I said. My voice was low. It was steady. It was the voice I used when I fired a dishonest contractor. It was the voice of a man who was done negotiating. What do you mean, Lincoln? Zhao asked. They are planning to put me in a home, Zhao. They are spending my money. They are wearing my clothes. They think I am a vegetable. They think I am finished. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Zhao spoke. His voice was dark. Just tell me what you need. I looked at the empty chair next to my bed. I looked at the gray walls. I looked at the future that was waiting for me if I did not act. Bring the papers, I said. Bring the laptop. And bring the car. I am leaving this hospital tonight. Tonight? Zhao asked. But you just had surgery. I do not care, I said. If I stay here, I die. If I go back to them, I die. I need to be reborn, Zhao. I paused. I watched the dust motes dancing in the light from the window. Execute Operation Omega, I said. I could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. We had discussed Operation Omega years ago as a joke. It was the scorched earth protocol. It was the nuclear option. It was the plan to liquidate everything and vanish. It was never meant to be real. Are you sure? Lincoln, Zhao asked softly. Once we start this, there is no going back. You will burn it all down. The house, the trust funds, the reputation. You will leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs. I looked at the phone in my hand. I thought about the way Lucille looked when she called me a burden. I thought about the way Brent laughed while drinking my wine. I am not burning it down, Zhao, I said. I am just turning off the lights. They have been living in my glow for too long. It is time they learned what the dark looks like. Do it. I hung up the phone. I lay back against the pillow. I was alone in the room, but I was no longer lonely. I had a plan. I had a mission. My heart was damaged, but it was still beating. And for the first time in 40 years, it was beating only for me. I knew exactly when they would arrive. I knew because I had paid the premium insurance bills for 20 years. And I knew that the hospital policy required a status update after 7 days of inpatient care. If they did not show up to sign the papers, the hospital would discharge me to a state facility. They could not risk that. If I went to a state facility, the state would audit my assets. The state would see the transfers. The state would ask questions that Brent and Kendra did not want to answer. So they had to come. They had to play the part of the concerned family one last time to secure the bag. They marched down the sterile white hallway of St. Joseph's Hospital at 10 in the morning. I was not there to see it with my own eyes, but I did not need to be. I knew them better than they knew themselves. Lucille was likely wearing her oversized sunglasses to hide the fact that she had not shed a single tear. She probably wore black, not out of mourning, but because she thought it made her look slimmer. Brent would be carrying his leather briefcase. Inside that briefcase was a power of attorney document drawn up by his corporate lawyers. It was a document that would strip me of my rights and give him full control over every bank account, every property, and every investment I owned. They walked with the confidence of vultures approaching a carcass that could not fight back. They stopped at the nurse's station. I can imagine the performance Kendra gave. She would put a tremble in her voice. She would ask how her poor father was doing. She would say they had been so worried, but work had been crazy. The nurses would look at them with professional detachment. They see this every day. They see the families who sleep in chairs, and they see the families who only show up when the checkbook needs to be balanced. They pointed my family toward room 304. Brent led the way. He pushed open the heavy wooden door, prepared to see a broken old man hooked up to machines. He was ready to put a pen in my weak hand and force me to sign away my life's work. He stepped inside and stopped dead in his tracks. Lucille bumped into him from behind. Kendra peered over his shoulder. The room was silent. The machines were off. The monitors were dark. But the most deafening thing in the room was the bed. It was empty. The sheets were stripped. The mattress was bare. There was no Lincoln. There was no patient. There was just the smell of bleach and the cold morning light filtering through the blinds. "Where is he?" Lucille snapped. Her voice lost its fake sweetness instantly. She turned to the hallway. "Nurse, where is my husband?" A nurse walked in. She checked her clipboard. "Mr. Lincoln was discharged early this morning, ma'am. He left against medical advice, but he was deemed mentally competent to make his own decisions. He called a private transport service." "Discharged," Brent shouted. He slammed his briefcase onto the rolling table. "That is impossible. He can barely walk. Who authorized this?" "He authorized it himself," the nurse said, calm and unbothered by Brent's anger. "He is an adult, Mr. Vance. We cannot hold him prisoner." Kendra rushed to the closet. She threw open the door. It was empty. My old suit was gone. My shoes were gone. My wallet was gone. "He took everything," Kendra said. Her voice was rising in panic. "Mom, he took everything." "No," Lucille said, shaking her head. "He could not have gone far. He has nowhere to go. He has no friends. We cut him off from everyone years ago. He is probably sitting in the lobby waiting for us to pick him up. He is playing games." Brent walked over to the bed. He looked down at the pillow. There was something there. It was the only thing left in the room. It was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper, folded in half. Resting on top of the paper was a black USB drive. Brent picked up the note. He recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the same block capital handwriting that he had seen on checks for his car payments and his country club fees. He unfolded the paper. Lucille and Kendra huddled around him. They expected a suicide note. They expected a plea for forgiveness. They expected me to beg them to take me back. They read the words I had written 4 hours earlier while sitting in the wheelchair by the window. The note was short. "To my family, you chose the party. You chose the cake. You chose the champagne. I hope it tasted sweet, because it was the last meal I will ever buy you. I did not die on that operating table, but the Lincoln you knew is dead. Do not look for me. Do not call me. As far as you are concerned, I am a ghost." Brent let out a short, harsh laugh. He threw the paper onto the mattress. "Unbelievable," he scoffed. "He is throwing a tantrum. He is a 68-year-old man acting like a teenager running away from home. He is scaring me, Brent," Kendra said nervously. She looked at the empty closet again. "What does he mean, the last meal? Who is going to pay the mortgage next week? Who is going to pay the credit cards?" "Relax, Kendra," Brent said. He adjusted his tie, looking at the USB drive in his hand. "He is bluffing. He left this drive. You know how he is. He probably put a video on here of him lecturing us about responsibility. Or maybe he left a digital copy of his budget spreadsheet. He wants us to chase him. He wants us to beg." He held up the USB drive. The light caught the metal casing. "This is good, actually," Brent said, smiling, a smile that was all teeth. "If he is gone, he cannot stop us. I bet this drive has the passwords to his investment accounts. I saw him using it last month when he was doing his taxes. If we have this, we do not need his signature. We can transfer the funds ourselves. We can claim he authorized it before he went senile and wandered off." Lucille sat down in the visitor chair. She fanned herself with her hand. "Thank God. For a second I thought he was serious. Just get the money, Brent. I need to book a spa day. This stress is terrible for my complexion. Brent sat on the edge of the empty hospital bed. He opened his briefcase and pulled out his sleek, expensive laptop, the one I bought him for Christmas. He booted it up. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. He inserted the USB drive into the side port. "Watch this," he said. "Daddy is about to make us very rich." He waited for the folder to open. He waited for the list of bank accounts and routing numbers. But the folder did not open. Instead, a black window popped up on the screen. Red text began to scroll rapidly down the display. It was not a file directory. It was a command script. "What is that?" Kendra asked, leaning in. "I do not know," Brent said. He frowned. He tapped the escape key. He tapped the enter key. Nothing happened. The text stopped scrolling. A single message blinked in the center of the screen, in large, bold letters. "Access denied. Protocol Omega initiated." "Omega?" Lucille asked. "What is Omega?" Before Brent could answer, a sound cut through the room. It was a sharp, mechanical buzz. It came from Brent's pocket. He pulled out his phone. It was a notification from American Express. Transaction declined. Recurring payment to Porsche Financial Services failed. Card suspended by primary account holder. "What the hell?" Brent whispered. Then Kendra's phone buzzed. She pulled it out of her purse. Her face went white. "Mom," she stammered. "The bank just sent me an alert. The joint checking account. The balance dropped to zero." "Zero?" Lucille shrieked. "What do you mean, zero? There was $50,000 in there yesterday." "It is gone," Kendra cried. "It says transfer initiated by LJ Trust." "Mom, that is Dad's trust." Brent's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. It sounded like an angry hornet in the quiet hospital room. Visa Black Card deactivated. MasterCard Gold deactivated. Corporate expense account frozen pending audit. Brent frantically typed on his keyboard. He tried to log into his online banking. He typed in his username. He typed in his password. Login failed. User account locked for suspicious activity. Please contact the administrator. "He is locking us out," Brent shouted. He slammed his fist onto the laptop. "The old man is locking us out of everything. Fix it, Brent," Lucille yelled, standing up. Her composure was gone. "Fix it now." "I have a hair appointment at noon. I cannot fix it," Brent yelled back. "He is the primary account holder. We are just authorized users. We have always been just authorized users. If he pulls the plug, we are sitting in the dark." Kendra began to sob. "But the house," she wept. "The mortgage is due on the 1st. If the accounts are frozen, how do we pay the mortgage?" Brent looked at the screen where the words "access denied" continued to blink mockingly. He looked at the empty bed. He looked at the note that he had dismissed as a joke. "He is not bluffing," Brent whispered. The arrogance was draining out of his face, leaving only gray fear. He did not just leave. He cut the power lines on his way out. Lucille grabbed her phone. She dialed my number. She put it on speaker. We all listened to the sound of the ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the voicemail clicked on. But it was not my usual greeting. It was not my awkward voice telling people to leave a message. It was a standard robotic operator voice. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Goodbye." The line went dead. The silence returned to room 304. But this time, it was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a tomb. They stood there in their expensive clothes, holding their useless phones, realizing for the first time in their lives that money does not grow on trees. It grew from the calloused hands of the man they had left to die, and those hands were closed. The drive back to the Blue Ridge estate was silent and suffocating. The air conditioning in Brent's luxury sedan was blasting, but the sweat on his forehead was not from the heat. It was from the fear that was slowly tightening its grip around his throat. Lucille stared out the window, refusing to look at the empty back seat where she had expected me to be. Kendra was chewing on her fingernail, a nervous habit she had not done since she was a teenager. They needed the safety of the mansion. They needed the high walls and the security gate to make them feel powerful again. They needed to believe that the hospital room and the frozen bank accounts were just a glitch, a mistake, a bad dream that would vanish once they stepped onto their marble floors. Brent pulled the car into the driveway. He reached for the garage door remote clipped to the visor. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder this time. The heavy oak doors remained shut. "Damn it," Brent muttered, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. The power must be out, or the battery is dead. Everything is breaking today. He parked the car in front of the main entrance. They got out. The Georgia sun was high and unforgiving, beating down on their black funeral clothes. Kendra marched up the stone steps to the massive double doors. She placed her thumb on the biometric scanner. It was the latest technology. It was supposed to flash green and unlock instantly. Instead, the small light on the panel turned a bright, angry red. A sharp beep echoed in the quiet afternoon. "Try it again," Lucille said impatiently, fanning herself with her purse. "You are pressing too hard, Kendra." Kendra wiped her thumb on her dress and pressed it again. Beep! Red light. Access denied. "Move aside," Brent growled, pushing past his wife. "You are doing it wrong." He punched in the 6-digit backup code on the keypad. 1985000. It was his birthday. He hit enter. Beep! Red light. System lockout active. A cold wind seemed to blow through the hot air. They looked at each other. The irritation on their faces began to dissolve, replaced by a creeping dread. This was not a dead battery. This was not a malfunction. This was a message. "What is going on?" Lucille whispered. Her voice trembled. "Why can't we get into my house?" Before Brent could answer, a black SUV pulled up behind their car, blocking them in. A large white box truck followed it, stopping right at the edge of the lawn. 2 men in work uniforms jumped out of the truck. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out of the SUV. He carried a clipboard, and he did not look like he was there for a social call. Brent stormed down the steps, trying to regain his authority. "Who are you?" he demanded, pointing a finger at the suit. "You are blocking my driveway. Move that truck immediately, or I will call the police." The man in the suit adjusted his glasses. He looked at Brent with the bored expression of someone who dealt with angry, broke people every day. "Mr. Brent Vance and Mrs. Kendra Vance?" he asked. "Yes," Brent snapped. "And who are you?" "My name is Mr. Henderson. I represent the LJ Trust. I am here to execute the immediate termination of your lease agreement." Kendra laughed. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Lease agreement? Are you crazy? We own this house. My name is on the deed. My father bought it for us." Mr. Henderson flipped a page on his clipboard. He pulled out a document stamped with the official county seal. "Correction, Mrs. Vance. Your name is on the deed for the physical structure of the house. That is true. However, the land the house sits on, the 5 acres of prime real estate, the gardens, the driveway you are standing on, that belongs to the LJ Trust. And according to the contract signed 5 years ago, the house is permitted to remain on the land only as long as the ground lease is valid." He handed the paper to Brent. "Please refer to Clause 14, Section B, the Filial Piety Clause." Brent snatched the paper. His eyes scanned the legal jargon frantically. His lips moved as he read. "The lease is granted on the condition that the grantee, Kendra Vance, provides adequate physical and emotional care for the grantor, Lincoln Vance. Any evidence of neglect, abuse, or abandonment renders the lease null and void immediately, upon which the grantor reserves the right to reclaim the land and evict all occupants within 1 hour." Brent looked up. His face was the color of ash. Abandonment. We did not abandon him. We visited him. 7 days later, Mr. Henderson said coldly, after leaving him alone in a critical condition to attend a party, "The trust has the hospital logs. We have the paramedic report, and we have the video footage from the ambulance. The violation is clear. The lease is terminated." Lucille stepped forward. She tried to use her charm, the charm that had worked on me for decades. "Sir, there must be a mistake. Lincoln would never do this. He loves this house. He built this life for us." I stood in the shadows of my memory, watching them. Lucille was right about one thing. I did love that land. I bought those 5 acres 30 years ago. Back then it was just red dirt and pine trees. I was a young man with a strong back and a dream. I worked 2 jobs, pouring concrete during the day and driving a taxi at night to save the down payment. I cleared the brush with my own hands. I dug the foundation for the first small house we lived in before the mansion. I planted the oak tree that shaded the driveway. Every inch of that soil was soaked with my sweat. I did it so my children would have grass to run on. I did it so my wife would have a garden. But over the years they stopped seeing the land. They only saw the status. They did not care about the oak tree I planted. They only cared about the gate that kept poor people out. They forgot that the land listens, and the land remembers who took care of it. Mr. Henderson checked his watch. You have 50 minutes remaining to vacate the premises. Vacate, Kendra screamed. We live here. All our stuff is inside. Mr. Henderson nodded to the men in the truck. That is why I brought the team. Anything you cannot carry to your car in the next hour will be removed and placed on the public curb. Once it touches the curb, it is considered abandoned property. No, Brent shouted. You cannot do this. I know the law. You have to give us 30 days' notice. This is a legal eviction. Mr. Henderson smiled, thin and sharp. Actually, Mr. Vance, since you do not pay rent and you do not own the land, you are classified as guests at will. Guests do not get 30 days. Guests get shown the door when they overstay their welcome. And you have overstayed yours by about 20 years. He signaled the movers. Proceed. The two men marched up the steps. They had a master key card. The red light on the door turned green for them. The door that was locked to my family opened wide for strangers. Stop them, Lucille shrieked, grabbing Brent's arm. Do something, Brent. You are a finance guy. Stop them. Brent stood frozen. He was holding the paper that proved he was nothing but a squatter in a fancy suit. He watched helplessly as the movers disappeared into his home. The next 40 minutes were a blur of chaos and humiliation. The movers did not bring boxes. They did not bring bubble wrap. They worked with brutal efficiency. They walked out with armfuls of designer clothes. They carried out Brent's golf clubs. They carried out Kendra's yoga mats and her collection of expensive vases. Hey, be careful with that, Kendra yelled, running after a mover who was carrying her limited edition handbags. Those are Chanel. Do not drop them. The mover did not slow down. He walked to the edge of the driveway where the manicured lawn met the asphalt. He dumped the bags onto the grass. The grass was wet from the automatic sprinklers that had just turned on. My bags, Kendra wailed, diving onto the wet grass trying to save her leather goods. Then came the furniture. They did not carry the heavy sofas or the grand piano. They only brought out the personal items, the portraits of themselves they loved so much, the awards Brent had bought for himself, the jewelry boxes. Lucille stood by the car, clutching her chest. She looked like a queen whose kingdom had been bombed. She saw a mover walking out with her collection of vintage hats. He tossed them onto a pile of shoes near the muddy gutter. Lincoln, she screamed. She looked around wildly, as if I might step out from behind a tree and stop the madness. Lincoln, stop this. I am sorry about the plate. I am sorry about the party. Just come back. But there was no answer. Only the sound of the sprinklers hissing and the thud of expensive items hitting the ground. Mr. Henderson walked over to Brent. Time is up. Please remove your vehicle from the driveway. The gate will be locked in 2 minutes. But we cannot fit all this in the car, Brent stammered, pointing at the mountain of possessions on the lawn. That is not my problem, Mr. Henderson said. I suggest you take what matters. Brent looked at the pile. He grabbed his golf clubs. He grabbed his laptop bag. He did not grab the photo album of his wedding. He did not grab the box of Terrell's childhood trophies. He grabbed what he could sell. Kendra was shoving clothes into the trunk. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Get in the car, Kendra, Brent yelled. We have to go. They scrambled into the sedan like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The car was stuffed full of clothes and shoes. Lucille sat in the front seat hugging a jewelry box, staring straight ahead. Her makeup was running down her face in black streaks. Brent reversed the car out of the driveway. His tires screeched on the asphalt. He backed out onto the public road. Mr. Henderson stood by the gate. He pressed a button on his remote. The massive iron gates began to swing shut. Through the rear window they watched the house disappear. They watched the wet pile of their remaining belongings sitting forlornly on the grass. They watched the sanctuary they had taken for granted lock them out forever. Lucille let out a long, low wail. It was the sound of a woman who finally understood the definition of loss. She reached for her phone to call me again, but she knew deep down that the line would be dead. The house was gone, the money was gone, and the man she had called a burden was the only one who held the keys. Brent Vance walked into the lobby of the Sterling Financial Tower at 9 in the morning. He did not walk with his usual swagger. He did not high-five the doorman. He did not wink at the receptionist. He walked with his head down, trying to hide the fact that he was wearing the same suit he had worn yesterday. It was wrinkled. There was a small stain of coffee on the lapel from the cheap motel cup he had chugged in the car. He smelled of stale sweat and desperation. He had spent the night in a Motel 6 off the highway because his credit cards were frozen, and he had only $40 in cash in his wallet. He approached the security turnstile. He pulled out his platinum employee badge. He tapped it against the scanner. Access denied. He tapped it again, harder. Access denied. The security guard looked up. It was old Mr. Miller, a man Brent had ignored for 5 years. "Mr. Vance," the guard said slowly, "the scanner is not broken. You need to go to the front desk. They have a temporary pass for you." Brent cursed under his breath. He snatched the paper pass from the receptionist and marched toward the elevators. He could feel the eyes of the junior analysts on him. Usually they looked at him with envy. Today they looked at him with something worse. They looked at him with morbid curiosity. They looked at him like people look at a car crash. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like it took a lifetime. Brent checked his phone. He had missed 20 calls from his partners. He had 10 urgent voicemails from the compliance department. He told himself it was just a misunderstanding. He told himself he could charm his way out of this. He was Brent Vance. He was the golden boy of the firm. He was the rainmaker. He stepped out onto the trading floor. It was chaos. Usually the floor was a hum of controlled activity. Today it was a riot. Phones were ringing off the hook. Traders were shouting orders. Red numbers were flashing across the giant LED screens that lined the walls. Brent looked at the ticker for his specific fund, the Vance Growth Fund. It was down. Not just down a few points. It was in free fall. It had lost 80% of its value in 3 hours. He ran to his office. His assistant Sarah was packing a box. She was crying. "Sarah, what is going on?" Brent shouted. "Why is the board flashing red? Who is selling?" Sarah looked at him. She did not call him sir. She did not offer him coffee. "Everyone is selling Brent," she said, "because the anchor investor pulled out. The liquidity is gone. The fund is insolvent." Brent froze. Anchor investor. That was impossible. His anchor investor was an anonymous entity known as the Angel. The Angel had backed Brent when he was just a junior broker. The Angel had pumped millions into his portfolio, making Brent look like a genius. The Angel never asked questions. The Angel just signed checks. "Get me the chairman," Brent yelled. "Get me the board. I need to explain." "You do not need to call them," Sarah said, picking up her box. "They are waiting for you in conference room A. And Brent, good luck. You are going to need it." Brent straightened his tie. He tried to smooth down his wrinkled jacket. He took a deep breath. He told himself he could fix this. He just needed to talk to the Angel. He just needed to ask for one more chance. He walked into conference room A. The room was cold. The long mahogany table was occupied by the 5 senior partners of the firm. At the head of the table sat the chairman, Mr. Sterling. He was a man of few words and even fewer mercies. "Sit down, Mr. Vance," Mr. Sterling said. He did not point to a chair. Brent remained standing. He tried to smile. "Gentlemen, I know it looks bad, but it is just a market correction. My primary investor, the Angel, is just rebalancing his portfolio. I can get him back on the phone. We have a special relationship." Mr. Sterling slid a thick file across the table. It stopped right at the edge in front of Brent. "Open it," Mr. Sterling said. Brent opened the file. The first page was a withdrawal notice. It was dated yesterday evening. The amount withdrawn was $50 million. "Look at the signature, Mr. Vance," Mr. Sterling said. "Look at the name of your Angel." Brent looked at the bottom of the page. He expected to see a corporate shell company from the Cayman Islands. He expected to see a foreign bank. Instead, he saw a signature written in blue ink, a signature he had seen on birthday cards and permission slips for 30 years. Lincoln Vance, trustee of the LJ Trust. The room spun. Brent gripped the edge of the table. "No," he whispered. "This is a mistake. My father-in-law is a construction worker. He is a nobody. He drives a truck. He does not have $50 million. Mr. Sterling laughed. It was a dry sound, devoid of humor. "You arrogant fool. Lincoln Vance is not a nobody. He owns half the commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta. He owns the land this very building sits on. He has been silently funding your career for 10 years because he wanted to support his daughter. He created the angel entity solely to give you a start. He thought you had potential. Mr. Sterling stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. He called me last night, Mr. Vance. He told me everything. He told me how you treated him. He told me about the party. He told me about the hospital. He told me that he was tired of funding a man who could not even show him basic human decency. Brent felt bile rise in his throat. Every bonus he had ever earned, every promotion, every award, it was all a lie. He had not earned any of it. It was all given to him by the man he had called a burden. The man he had tried to put in a state home was the only reason he had a job. So the money is gone, Brent stammered. The money is gone, Mr. Sterling said, turning back to face him. And so is your reputation. You are not a financial genius, Mr. Vance. You are a charity case, and the charity has just been cut off. I can fix this, Brent pleaded. I can find new investors. I know people. You know nobody, Mr. Sterling snapped. You are toxic. The fund has collapsed. We are facing lawsuits from the minority investors. You have cost this firm millions in a single morning. Mr. Sterling pressed a button on the intercom. Security, please come to conference room A. Brent backed away. No, you cannot fire me. I am a partner. I have equity. Your equity is worth 0, Mr. Sterling said, and you are being terminated for cause, gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and frankly, for being a person of low moral character. 2 large security guards entered the room. They were not the friendly old Mr. Miller from the lobby. These were the enforcement team. Escort Mr. Vance out of the building, Mr. Sterling ordered. He is not to return to his office. Wait, Brent said. My laptop, my contacts. Property of the firm, Mr. Sterling said. My car, Brent said. My company car, it is in the garage. Property of the firm, Mr. Sterling said. The keys, Mr. Vance. Give them to the guard. Brent reached into his pocket. His hand shook as he pulled out the key fob to the Mercedes he loved more than his wife. He placed it on the mahogany table. Phone 2, Mr. Sterling added. Brent handed over the latest iPhone. Now get out, Mr. Sterling said, turning his back. You disgust me. The guards grabbed Brent by the arms. They did not drag him, but their grip was firm. They marched him out of the conference room. They marched him past the glass walls of the trading floor. Hundreds of heads turned. The people who used to worship him now watched him being paraded like a criminal. He saw Sarah looking at him. She did not look sad anymore. She looked indifferent. She was already typing a resume. They took him down the elevator. They took him through the lobby. They did not let him stop at the restroom. They walked him straight to the revolving doors. One guard pushed the door. Brent stumbled out onto the hot pavement of Peachtree Street. The other guard threw a small cardboard box at his feet. It contained a framed photo of his wife and a stapler. If you come back onto the premises, you will be arrested for trespassing, the guard said. The doors locked behind them. Brent stood on the sidewalk. He was wearing a wrinkled suit. He had no phone. He had no car. He had no job. He had no money. Passers-by walked around him. A businessman bumped into his shoulder and muttered an insult. A taxi honked its horn. Brent looked up at the towering glass building. He looked at the 41st floor, where he used to be a king. He realized with a sickening thud in his stomach that he had never been a king. He had been a jester, dancing for a king he was too blind to see. He looked down at the photo of Kendra in the box. He wondered if she would still love him now that he was just Brent, just a man on the street. He wondered how he was going to get back to the motel without a car. He started walking. He did not know where he was going. He just knew that for the first time in his life, he was walking on his own 2 feet, and the road ahead was very long and very hard. While Brent was standing on the sidewalk with his box of shame, my son Tyrell was living in a fantasy world on Interstate 85. At 28 years old, Tyrell had never held a job for longer than 3 months. He called himself an entrepreneur, but his only business model was asking me for money. He drove a bright yellow sports car that cost more than my first house. It was a car I had leased for him under my name because his credit score was lower than his age. I did it because Lucille begged me. She said the car would give him confidence for job interviews. Instead, it gave him a vehicle to speed away from his responsibilities. That Tuesday afternoon, he was racing. I know this because I received a notification on my phone from the vehicle tracking system. He was driving at 110 miles per hour, weaving through traffic like a maniac. He had 2 friends in the car with him. I knew them. They were leeches who only hung around Tyrell because he paid for the drinks and the gas. I could imagine the scene inside the car. The music would be deafening. Tyrell would be shouting over the bass, bragging about how his family owned half of Atlanta. He would be telling them that the car was just a toy, and that he was planning to buy a yacht next month. I sat in my quiet rental cabin miles away and opened the leasing app on my tablet. I saw the little yellow dot moving fast on the map. I saw the speed gauge climbing. 115, 120. He was reckless. He did not care about the families in the minivans he was cutting off. He did not care about the laws. He thought he was untouchable because he was a Vance. It was time to remind him that gravity applies to everyone. I navigated to the remote control menu. There was a button labeled Immobilization Protocol. It was designed for use if the car was stolen. In a way, the car had been stolen. It had been stolen by an ungrateful child who thought love was a transaction. I pressed the button. Confirm. On the highway, the result was instant. The roar of the V8 engine cut out. The power steering stiffened. The digital dashboard went black. The air conditioning died. Tyrell must have panicked. The car began to coast, losing speed rapidly. He would be stomping on the gas pedal, confused and angry. He would be cursing the machine. He managed to wrestle the heavy steering wheel and guide the silent car onto the emergency shoulder. It rolled to a stop on the gravel just past the exit for downtown. I watched the dot on my screen stop moving. I took a sip of my tea. The first phase was complete. Now, I waited for the second phase. Tyrell sat in the sweltering heat of the car. He tried to restart the engine. He pushed the start button again and again. Nothing. Not even a click. His friends were probably laughing at him now. The king of the road looked like a fool in a broken-down toy. He did not call a tow truck. He did not call a mechanic. He did exactly what I knew he would do. He got out of the car and started kicking the tires. He screamed at the traffic rushing by. He was a child throwing a tantrum on the side of the interstate. 10 minutes later, the blue lights appeared. A Georgia State Patrol cruiser pulled up behind the stalled yellow car. The officer stepped out. He was a veteran trooper with a flat hat and zero patience for nonsense. Tyrell did not greet the officer with respect. He did not apologize for being stopped on a busy highway. He leaned against the car, crossing his arms. "Officer, my car is a piece of junk," Tyrell shouted. "You need to call a flatbed for me, and make it quick. I have a VIP reservation at the club in an hour." The officer walked closer. He looked at the car. He looked at Tyrell's flashy clothes. "License and registration," the officer said calmly. Tyrell rolled his eyes. He reached into the glove compartment. He pulled out a crumpled envelope. He handed it to the officer along with his license. "Do you know who my father is?" Tyrell asked. "My father is Lincoln Vance. He knows the mayor. If you write me a ticket for breaking down, you will be directing traffic at a middle school by tomorrow." The officer did not blink. He took the documents back to his cruiser. He typed the information into his computer. I had anticipated this moment. 3 days ago, while I was still in the hospital bed, I had canceled the automatic renewal for the car registration. Yesterday, I had called the insurance company and removed Tyrell from the policy. The officer walked back to Tyrell. His hand was resting on his belt. "Mr. Vance," the officer said, "step away from the vehicle." "What?" Tyrell snapped. "Just call the tow truck." "Step away from the vehicle and turn around," the officer ordered. His voice was no longer a request. It was a command. Tyrell hesitated. He looked at his friends in the passenger seat. They were not laughing anymore. They were looking down at their phones, trying to look invisible. "This is ridiculous," Tyrell muttered. He turned around. The officer grabbed Tyrell's wrists and clicked the handcuffs on. The sound of the metal ratchets was sharp and final. "Hey!" Tyrell shouted, struggling. "You cannot do this. What am I being arrested for?" "You are under arrest for operating a motor vehicle with an expired registration and no active insurance," the officer stated. "Also, your license was suspended this morning due to unpaid fines." "Unpaid fines!" Tyrell yelled. "My dad pays the fines. Check the system. It is a mistake." "It is no mistake," the officer said, spinning Tyrell around to face him. "The vehicle has been flagged for repossession by the leasing agency. They reported a default on the payments." Tyrell's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving him looking small and scared. "Dad," he whispered. The officer marched him to the back of the cruiser. Tyrell had to bend his head to get in. The leather seat of the police car was hard plastic, not the soft leather he was used to. Through the wire mesh, he watched a tow truck arrive. He watched the driver hook up his yellow car. He watched his friends get out and walk away, leaving him alone. They did not even look back. At the precinct, Tyrell was processed like any other criminal. They took his fingerprints. They took his mugshot. They took his belt and his shoelaces. They put him in a holding cell with a man who was shouting at the wall, and a kid who had been caught shoplifting. Tyrell sat on the cold metal bench. The smell of the cell was a mix of stale urine and industrial cleaner. He waited for the lawyer to show up. He waited for me to burst through the doors and demand his release. But nobody came. After 3 hours, the guard walked over. "Vance, you get one phone call," the guard grunted. "Make it count." Tyrell ran to the phone on the wall. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely dial. He did not call me. He knew deep down that I was the one who had turned off the car. He called the only person he thought could save him. He called Lucille. "Mom," he cried into the receiver when she picked up. "Mom, you have to come get me. I am in jail. The cop arrested me. They took the car. They said the insurance was gone. You have to bring $500 for bail. Hurry, Mom. It is scary in here." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy silence. "Mom?" Tyrell asked. "Are you there?" Then he heard Lucille sobbing. It was a broken, hopeless sound. "I cannot come, Tyrell," Lucille whispered. "What do you mean?" Tyrell shouted. "Just use the emergency card. Use the cash in the safe. Just get me out." "There is no cash, Tyrell," Lucille said, her voice choking. "The house is gone. The cards are frozen. Dad cut us off. He cut us all off. We are at a Motel 6 on the highway, and they just declined my card for the room. We are going to sleep in the car tonight, Tyrell, but we do not have a car, because Brent lost his company car too." Tyrell gripped the phone. The receiver felt slippery in his sweaty palm. "So you are leaving me here?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You are leaving me in jail." "I have no money, son," Lucille cried. "I have nothing. I cannot help you." The line went dead. Tyrell slowly hung up the phone. He turned around and looked at the cell. The man yelling at the wall had stopped and was staring at him. Tyrell slid down the wall until he hit the floor. He pulled his knees up to his chest. For 28 years, he had walked through life with a golden parachute strapped to his back. He had jumped off cliffs expecting to float. Today, he hit the ground. And he realized that without Lincoln Vance to catch him, he was just another broke man in a cage. He buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in his life, he cried tears that were not for show. He cried because he was hungry. He cried because he was alone. And he cried because he knew that tomorrow would be even worse. The neon sign outside the window flickered with a maddening buzz. It cast a sickly pink light into the room every 3 seconds. Buzz, pink, darkness. Buzz, pink, darkness. It was a rhythm that was slowly driving the occupants of room 104 to the brink of insanity. This was the Sunshine Motel, but there was no sunshine here. There was only the smell of stale cigarette smoke that had seeped into the yellowed wallpaper over decades. There was the smell of mildew coming from the bathroom, where the faucet dripped a relentless torture beat. And there was the smell of 3 people who were used to imported silk and Egyptian cotton, now sweating in polyester clothes they had worn for 2 days straight. Lucille sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. She stared at the carpet. It was a dark brown color, probably chosen to hide stains, but she could see them anyway. There were burns from cigarettes. There were dark splotches that looked like dried blood or spilled wine. She pulled her knees together and wrapped her arms around herself. She was cold despite the humidity in the room. The air conditioner unit in the window rattled like a dying animal. It blew out air that smelled like wet dog and dust. She looked around the room. It was smaller than her walk-in closet at the Blue Ridge estate. There were 2 double beds crammed into the space. Brent lay on one, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. Kendra paced back and forth in the narrow strip of floor between the beds and the dresser. 3 steps forward, turn. 3 steps back, turn. She was like a caged tiger, but without the grace. "This cannot be happening," Kendra muttered. She had said it 100 times in the last hour. "This is a nightmare. I am going to wake up in my canopy bed, and the maid will bring me my green juice." "Shut up, Kendra," Brent groaned. He did not look away from the ceiling. "Just shut up. Your voice is giving me a migraine. I am hungry, Kendra snapped, stopping her pacing to glare at him. I have not eaten since breakfast yesterday. Do something. You are the man. Go get us food. Brent laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. With what money, Kendra? Your dad froze the accounts. My wallet is empty. Unless you want me to go out there and beg on the street corner, we are not eating. Lucille felt a pang of guilt deep in her stomach. It was a sharp, twisting pain that had nothing to do with hunger. She thought about Tyrell. Her baby boy was sitting in a jail cell right now. He was probably cold. He was probably scared. And she was sitting here in a motel room feeling sorry for herself because the sheets were scratchy. We have to get Tyrell out, Lucille whispered. Brent sat up. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. The springs creaked loudly. Forget Tyrell, Lucille. He is safer in jail than we are in here. At least they feed him 3 meals a day. We are the ones in trouble. Look at us, the great Vance family, hiding in a dump that charges $30 a night. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the greasy curtain to look at the parking lot. Their car was not there because they did not have a car. They had taken a taxi here and used the last of Brent's cash to pay the driver and the motel clerk. They were stranded. This is your fault, you know, Brent said, turning to look at Lucille. My fault, Lucille gasped. How is this my fault? Lincoln is the one doing this. He is the monster. Lincoln is reacting to you, Brent spat. He walked closer to her. His eyes were bloodshot. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. You are his wife. You were supposed to manage him. You were supposed to keep him happy so the checks kept coming. But no, you had to treat him like a dog. You had to belittle him in front of everyone. You pushed him too far, Lucille, and now we are all paying for your arrogance. Kendra stepped in between them. Do not talk to Mom like that, Brent. You are one to talk. You were the one who organized the party. You were the one who told the paramedics not to come back. You were the one who tried to put him in a nursing home, and who wanted that house, Kendra Brent shouted, spinning on his wife. Who wanted the Chanel bags? Who wanted the trips to Paris? You did. You wanted the lifestyle, but you did not want to work for it. I married you because I thought you came with a safety net. I thought I was marrying into a dynasty. Turns out I married a parasite attached to a construction worker. Kendra's mouth fell open. You married me for money, Brent sneered. I certainly did not marry you for your personality. You are a spoiled brat, Kendra. You have never earned $1 in your life. You think money is magic. You think it just appears. Well, guess what? The magician quit. The show is over. I hate you, Kendra screamed. I hate you. The feeling is mutual, Brent yelled back. Lucille covered her ears. Stop it. Both of you stop it. We are a family. We need to stick together. Family. Brent laughed. We are not a family, Lucille. We are a corporation that just went bankrupt, and you are the CEO who drove us into the ground. He walked over to the dresser and picked up the ice bucket. It was empty. He threw it against the wall. The plastic cracked with a loud snap. We need cash, he breathed heavily. We need cash right now. We need to hire a lawyer. We need to sue Lincoln to get access to the trust. If we can get a lawyer to file an emergency injunction, we might be able to unfreeze the accounts. But lawyers cost money. He looked at Lucille, his eyes narrowed. Wait a minute, he said slowly. What? Lucille asked, shrinking back against the headboard. The rainy day fund, Brent said. He took a step toward her. The emergency account. The one Lincoln set up for you 10 years ago. He told me about it once. He said he put $50,000 in a separate account in your name only, just in case something happened to him. Kendra's eyes widened. She turned to her mother. Mom, is that true? Do you have $50,000? Lucille looked down at her hands. She twisted her wedding ring. The diamonds sparkled in the dim light. It was the only thing of value she had left. Mom, Kendra said, her voice rising in hope. Answer him. Do you have the money? Lucille did not answer. She bit her lip. Mom. Brent shouted. Where is the money? We can use it. We can get a hotel. We can get a lawyer. We can get Tyrell out. Give me the access code. Lucille began to cry, soft, pathetic sobs that shook her shoulders. I do not have it, she whispered. What do you mean you do not have it? Brent demanded. Did Lincoln freeze that too? No, Lucille sobbed. He did not freeze it. It is gone. Gone? Kendra asked. Gone where? I spent it, Lucille cried. "Spent it on what?" Brent yelled. $50,000, Lucille. What did you buy? Another fur coat, more jewelry. We can sell it. Where is it? I did not buy anything, Lucille wailed. She looked up at them, tears streaming down her face, ruining her mascara. I lost it. The room went silent. The buzzing of the neon sign seemed to get louder. You lost it? Brent repeated. How? Gambling, Lucille confessed. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the small room it sounded like a scream. Online poker. And that investment thing. The crypto thing you told us about last year, Brent. You said it was a sure thing. You said it would double in a month. Brent's face went pale. That was a high-risk play, Lucille. I told you to put a little bit in, not the whole emergency fund. I wanted to be rich too, Lucille cried. I wanted to have my own money, so I did not have to ask Lincoln for every penny. I wanted to surprise you all. I put $20,000 in the crypto and it crashed. Then I tried to win it back at the virtual casino. I thought if I could just win one big hand, I could replace the money before Lincoln found out. But I kept losing. I lost it all. Every cent. The account is empty. It has been empty for 6 months. Kendra stared at her mother. She looked at the woman who had always judged her for her spending habits, the woman who had criticized her choices, the woman who acted like the queen of the manor. You gambled our safety net away, Kendra whispered. I was trying to help, Lucille pleaded. I wanted to be independent. You are a junkie, Brent said with disgust. He sat down on the other bed and put his head in his hands. We are dead. We are actually dead. We have no leverage. We have no resources. We are stuck in a roach motel with a gambling addict. Don't call me that, Lucille snapped, trying to regain some dignity. I am your mother. You are nothing, Kendra said. Her voice was cold, colder than the air outside. Kendra stepped closer to the bed. She looked down at her mother. The rage that had been building inside her for days finally found a target. It was not Lincoln. It was not Brent. It was the woman who had raised her to be useless, and then failed to provide the one thing she was good for. Money. You let Dad go to that hospital alone, Kendra said. You stopped the ambulance from taking him right away because of a plate. And now we find out you stole our future. It was my money, Lucille argued weakly. It was Dad's money, Kendra screamed. Everything is Dad's money. You never earned a dime. Kendra raised her hand. She did not think about it. It was an impulse born of hunger and fear and pure hatred. She slapped Lucille across the face. The sound was sharp and loud like a pistol crack. Lucille's head snapped to the side. She gasped, holding her cheek. She looked at her daughter in shock. Kendra had never defied her. Kendra had always been her little doll. You hit me, Lucille whispered. I should have done it years ago, Kendra hissed. She did not look sorry. She looked liberated. Brent did not move to help Lucille. He did not scold Kendra. He just sat there, staring at the floor, a twisted smile playing on his lips. Welcome to the real world, ladies, he muttered. Lucille curled into a ball on the bed. She pulled the thin blanket over her head to hide from her daughter's eyes. She sobbed into the pillow, but nobody comforted her. In that cramped, smelly room, the family bond that they thought was made of gold turned out to be made of nothing but greed. And now that the greed was starving, they were ready to eat each other alive. The dynasty of the Vances had officially fallen, not with a bang, but with a slap in a $30 motel room. And outside, the neon sign kept buzzing. Buzz. Pink. Darkness. Just like their future. The smoke from the hickory wood chips curled up into the late afternoon sky. It smelled of summer and freedom. I sat on the porch of the small farmhouse I had secretly bought 5 years ago. It was not a mansion. It did not have marble floors or crystal chandeliers. It had wide wooden floorboards that creaked when you walked on them, and a tin roof that sang when it rained. It was perfect. Around me sat 3 men who had known me before I had money. There was Sam, who I laid bricks with in the 80s. There was Elias, who ran the best barbecue joint in Decatur. And there was Zhao, my lawyer and my oldest friend. We were drinking iced tea and laughing about a fishing trip we took 20 years ago. For the first time in a decade, my chest did not hurt. The tightness that had plagued me in the Blue Ridge estate was gone. But peace is a fragile thing when you have unfinished business. I saw the dust cloud before I saw the car. It was a beat-up sedan, probably a cheap rideshare or a taxi coming down the long gravel driveway. Behind it was a rusted hatchback driven by a man who looked like he slept in his clothes. That would be the private investigator. I had expected them to hire a top firm, but without my money they had to settle for a bottom feeder, who probably found me by following Zhao. "Here comes the circus," Sam said quietly, putting down his glass. I did not move from my rocking chair. I watched the taxi skid to a halt in front of the iron gate. The gate was locked. I had installed it myself last week. It was 6 feet high and solid steel. The doors of the taxi flew open. They spilled out like garbage from a tipped can. Lucille looked unrecognizable. Her hair was frizzy in the humidity. Her designer dress was wrinkled and stained. She was wearing sandals that were too small for her swollen feet. Brent looked like a madman. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, and his face was red with heat and rage. Kendra trailed behind them, looking at her phone as if hoping a signal would magically appear to save her. They did not see the peace. They did not see the beauty of the oak trees, or the vegetable garden I had planted. They only saw a fortress they needed to breach. Lincoln Lucille screamed. She grabbed the iron bars of the gate and shook them. Her voice cracked. "Lincoln, I know you are in there. Open this gate right now. You cannot hide from us." I took a sip of my tea. I looked at Zhao. He nodded and stood up. He walked down the porch steps and stopped halfway down the path, just out of shouting range. The noise attracted attention. My farm is in a quiet community where neighbors look out for each other. Mrs. Higgins from next door came out onto her porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Old Man Miller, who lived across the road, walked out to his mailbox, squinting at the commotion. They knew me simply as the nice old man who fixed their fences. They had no idea about the war that had followed me here. Brent saw the neighbors. A light turned on in his desperate eyes. He decided to put on a show. He turned away from the gate and faced Mrs. Higgins. He threw his arms up in the air. "Please help us," he shouted. His voice was thick with fake emotion. "We are worried sick. My father-in-law is trapped in there. He is suffering from severe dementia. He wandered away from the hospital a week ago. We have been searching everywhere for him." He pointed a shaking finger at Zhao. "That man is holding him hostage," Brent yelled. "He is taking advantage of a confused old man to steal his pension. We just want to bring our father home. Please, someone call the police." Mrs. Higgins looked concerned. She took a step toward her phone. She was a good woman, and the idea of elder abuse terrified her. Lucille picked up the cue. She slumped against the gate, sobbing dramatically. "Oh, Lincoln," she wailed. "My poor husband. He does not know what he is doing. He needs his medication. He needs his family." Kendra stood by the taxi, crossing her arms. She looked bored by the performance, but she chimed in. "Daddy, come out. We are not mad at you. We just want to take care of you." I sat on the porch and felt a cold fire burning in my gut. They were doing it again. They were rewriting reality to suit their needs. They were painting me as the victim and themselves as the saviors. It was the same lie they had told for years. Lincoln is simple. Lincoln is old. Lincoln needs us to manage his money. I stood up. My knees were stiff, but my back was straight. I walked down the steps. I walked past Zhao. I walked all the way to the gate. I stopped 2 feet away from the bars. I looked Lucille in the eye. The sobbing stopped instantly. Her eyes darted over my shoulder, looking for the house, looking for signs of wealth, looking for anything she could take. "Lincoln," she whispered, "open the gate. We are starving. We have nowhere to go. Tyrell is in jail. You have to fix this." I looked at Brent. He was still playing to the audience. "Open the gate, Lincoln," Brent hissed low enough so the neighbors could not hear, "or I swear to God I will sue you for everything you have left. Abandonment is a crime. You have a legal obligation to support your wife. I have already talked to a lawyer. If you do not let us in, I will paint you as a monster in every paper in Atlanta." I looked at Kendra. "Daddy, this place is gross," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Just sign the check so we can go to a hotel. I need a shower." I looked past them to the neighbors. Mrs. Higgins was now standing by the fence listening. Mr. Miller had walked closer. A few other people had stopped their cars to watch. "You want to talk about abandonment, Brent?" I asked. My voice was calm. It carried in the quiet country air. "Yes," Brent shouted, regaining his confidence. "You abandoned us. You cut off the cards. You locked us out of the house. You left your wife with nothing. You are a cruel, sick old man." He turned to the crowd. "Did you hear that, folks? He left his wife on the street. He is letting his own grandson rot in jail. What kind of man does that?" The crowd murmured. They looked at me with suspicion. Brent was a good salesman. He knew how to sell a lie. I nodded to Zhao. Zhao reached into his briefcase. He did not pull out a legal document. He pulled out a large portable Bluetooth speaker. He set it on the hood of my truck, which was parked near the gate. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "I want you all to listen closely," I said to the crowd. "This is the recording from the Fulton County Emergency Dispatch. It was taken 7 days ago, at 8:45 in the evening." Brent's face went pale. He recognized the date. He recognized the time. "No!" he shouted, lunging for the gate. "Turn it off. You cannot play that. That is private." The audio crackled to life. It was loud. It echoed off the trees. It echoed off the metal of the gate. The voice of the young paramedic filled the air. "Ma'am, his vitals are unstable. This is not a drill. He could die." Then came the background noise, the sound of clinking glasses, the sound of laughter, the sound of a string quartet playing Mozart. Then came Kendra's voice, sharp, annoyed, clear as a bell. "Look, we are right in the middle of the toasts. Brent is about to cut the cake. We cannot leave right now. It would ruin the whole flow of the party. Just give him some oxygen and tell him to sleep it off." The crowd went silent. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth with her hand. The recording continued. "But ma'am," the medic said. "Stop calling me," Kendra's voice snapped. "If he is really sick, use his insurance card. Do not bill us." The recording ended with the click of the phone hanging up. The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air. It was a silence of judgment. It was a silence of absolute condemnation. I looked at the neighbors. Mrs. Higgins was no longer looking at me with suspicion. She was looking at Lucille and Kendra with pure disgust. Mr. Miller spat on the ground and shook his head. "You cut the cake," Mrs. Higgins yelled, her voice trembling with anger. "Your father was dying, and you were worried about a cake. It was a misunderstanding," Brent stammered, backing away from the gate. "The recording is out of context. We thought he was faking it." "Faking a heart attack?" Mr. Miller shouted. "Get out of here. You make me sick." Lucille shrank back. She looked at the neighbors, who were now advancing toward the gate, not to help them, but to drive them away. She looked at me. "Lincoln, please," she begged. It was not like that. I was in shock. I looked at her. I saw the woman I had married 40 years ago. But the love was gone. It had been replaced by a deep, weary pity. "You chose the party, Lucille," I said softly. "Now go back to it." I turned my back on them. I walked back toward the house. Behind me, I heard Brent screaming threats. I heard Kendra crying. I heard the neighbors yelling at them to leave before they called the sheriff for trespassing. "Lincoln, come back," Lucille screamed. "You cannot do this. We are your family." I sat back down in my rocking chair. Sam handed me my iced tea. The ice had melted a little, but it still tasted sweet. "That is not family," Sam said, watching the dust settle as the taxi turned around and sped away. "That is just a bill you finally paid off." I nodded. I took a sip. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen, because for the first time in my life, I was not watching it through the window of a house I paid for, but could not enjoy. I was watching it as a free man, and the silence that followed was not lonely. It was victorious. I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel when my family left me to die in a hospital bed. I thought I had seen the worst of their greed when they tried to break into my home. But I was wrong. The bottom of the barrel was much deeper and much darker than I could have ever imagined. 2 days after the confrontation at the farm gate, a sheriff's deputy pulled up to my porch. He was a young man who looked uncomfortable doing his job. He handed me a thick envelope, manila. He did not look me in the eye when he told me I had been served. I opened the envelope right there on the porch. The first page was a petition filed in the Fulton County Superior Court. It was a petition for emergency conservatorship. The plaintiffs were Brent Vance and Kendra Vance. The defendant was Lincoln Vance. I read the words they had written about me. They did not just want my money anymore. They wanted my mind. They claimed that I was suffering from advanced cognitive decline. They claimed that my recent actions, specifically the closing of bank accounts and the eviction of family members, were clear evidence of a mental breakdown. They described me as paranoid, erratic, and dangerous to myself. They claimed that I had fallen under the undue influence of a predatory third party named Zhao, who was manipulating me to steal the family estate. It was a masterpiece of fiction. They took my strength and painted it as weakness. They took my justice and painted it as madness. They were asking the court to strip me of my rights. They wanted to take away my ability to sign checks. They wanted to take away my right to choose where I lived. They wanted to appoint Brent as my legal guardian. The man who could not manage his own hedge fund wanted to manage my life. I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper. A normal father might have been heartbroken. A normal father might have cried at the betrayal. But I did not cry. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of a soldier who finally sees the enemy clearly on the battlefield. They had made a fatal error. They thought I was a senile old man who would crumble under the pressure of a lawsuit. They did not know that for 20 years, I had been preparing for this war even before I knew who the enemy would be. I drove to Zhao's office the next morning. It was located in a brick building downtown. It was not flashy. Zhao did not believe in glass walls and fancy espresso machines. He believed in oak desks and hard work. When I walked in, Zhao looked worried. He had a copy of the lawsuit on his desk. "Lincoln," he said, rubbing his temples. "This is serious. They have hired a lawyer named Marcus Thorne. He is cheap, but he is loud. He is going to turn this into a circus. He is going to drag your name through the mud. He is going to say you are incompetent. He is going to say I am a thief." I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. I did not look worried. I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out a book. It was not a digital tablet. It was not a laptop. It was a physical book bound in black leather. The spine was cracked from age. The corners were worn smooth. It smelled of old paper and history. I placed it on the desk with a heavy thud. Zhao looked at the book. "What is this?" he asked. "I call it the Ledger of Truth," I said. I opened the book. The pages were filled with my handwriting, rows and rows of entries dating back 2 decades. "You see, Zhao," I said, pointing to a line from 2005. "I knew my children were bad with money a long time ago, but I never scolded them. I never yelled. I just wrote it down." I turned the page. "Here's the entry from when Brent asked me for $50,000 to start a business in 2010. He told me it was a tech startup. I investigated. There was no startup. He used the money to pay off a gambling debt in Las Vegas. I never told him I knew. I just wrote it down." I turned another page. "Here is the entry from when Kendra totaled her car while driving under the influence. I paid the police to keep it off the record so she could finish college. I paid the damages. She told me it was an accident caused by rain. I knew she was lying. I wrote it down." I flipped through the pages. There were hundreds of entries. Loans that were never repaid, lies that were told at Thanksgiving dinners, items that went missing from my house. Every single act of betrayal was documented with dates, amounts, and evidence. "They say I am senile," I told Zhao. "They say I do not know what I am doing. This book proves that I have been the only one paying attention for 20 years. They think they are walking into a hearing to take advantage of a confused old man. They are walking into a trap." Zhao picked up the book. He read a few pages. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. "This is admissible," he said. "This is contemporaneous evidence. Lincoln, this is not just a defense. This is a weapon." "Then let us go use it," I said. The day of the hearing arrived. The sky was gray and it was drizzling rain. It was fitting weather for a funeral, and that is exactly what this was. It was the funeral of my relationship with my children. We walked into the courtroom. It was a small room with wood-paneled walls. The air was stale. Brent and Kendra were already there sitting at the plaintiff's table. They had dressed the part. Brent wore a somber gray suit that looked modest. Kendra wore a high-necked black dress and no jewelry. They looked like grieving children who were forced to do a difficult thing for the sake of their father. Lucille was sitting in the gallery behind them, wiping her eyes with a tissue. When I walked in, they did not look at me. They stared straight ahead. Perhaps they were ashamed, or perhaps they were just rehearsing their lies. Their lawyer, Marcus Thorne, stood up. He was a short man with a loud tie and a smile that looked like it was painted on. He looked at me with mock sympathy. We took our seats. The judge entered. She was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked tired. She had probably seen a dozen family disputes already that week. "Judge Miller, I presume we can begin," she said. Mr. Thorne stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the center of the room. He did not use a microphone, but his voice boomed. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today with heavy hearts. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Vance, love their father very much. For decades, Lincoln Vance was a pillar of the community. He was a strong man, a generous man. But time comes for us all. He turned to point at me. In the last 6 months, Lincoln has changed. He has become paranoid. He has become hostile. He has cut off his family from their financial resources without warning. He has evicted his own daughter from her home. He has refused medical advice after a massive heart attack. These are not the actions of a rational man. These are the actions of a mind in decline. Thorne walked over to the witness stand where Brent was waiting to be called. We believe that Mr. Vance is suffering from dementia. We believe he is being manipulated by his attorney, Mr. Zhao, who has isolated him from his loved ones to gain control of the estate. We are asking the court to step in. We are asking the court to grant emergency conservatorship to Brent Vance so that he can protect his father's assets and ensure he gets the medical care he so desperately needs. Brent nodded solemnly. He looked at the judge with wide, innocent eyes. I sat there and listened. I did not fidget. I did not frown. I kept my face as blank as a stone. Inside, I was marveling at their audacity. They were using my own money to pay a lawyer to call me crazy. They were using my generosity as proof of my incompetence. The judge looked at me. Mr. Vance, do you have a response? Zhao stood up. He did not walk to the center of the room. He stood behind his table. He looked calm. He looked dangerous. Your Honor, Zhao said, we do not deny that Mr. Vance has cut off his family. We do not deny that he evicted them, but we reject the claim that these are the actions of a crazy man. We intend to prove that these are the actions of a man who finally woke up. Thorne scoffed. Woke up. He left them homeless. He is sitting on millions of dollars while his grandson is in jail. That is malice, Your Honor. Or it is madness. It is justice, Zhao said quietly. Thorne waved his hand dismissively. We have medical experts, Your Honor. We have testimony from the family. We have the timeline of his erratic behavior. The judge looked at the clock. Mr. Thorne, call your first witness. Thorne called Brent to the stand. Brent walked up, looking confident. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Vance, Thorne asked, tell the court about the night of the party. Tell the court about your father's mental state. Brent took a deep breath. He looked at me for the first time. His eyes were cold. He was confused, Brent said. He showed up in an old suit thinking it was a funeral. He was breaking dishes in the kitchen. He was screaming at my wife. We tried to calm him down, but he collapsed. We called the ambulance immediately. We wanted to go with him, but he became violent and told us to stay away. He was not himself. Lies. Every word was a lie designed to fit their narrative. Thorne smiled. And the finances. When did you notice the irregularities? Last week, Brent said. He drained the accounts. He stopped paying the bills. He even canceled the insurance on my son's car, which led to his arrest. He is destroying everything he built because he is paranoid that we are stealing from him. But we have never taken a dime that he did not give us freely. I looked down at the black book on the table in front of me. My hand rested on the cover. I could feel the texture of the leather. I could feel the weight of the truth inside. Brent finished his testimony with a tear in his eye. I just want my dad back, he said. I want to make sure he is safe. Thorne looked triumphant. Your witness, he said to Zhao. Zhao stood up. He did not bring a notepad. He picked up the black book. He walked slowly toward the witness stand. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed. Mr. Vance, Zhao said, you say you have never taken a dime that was not given freely. You say you want to protect your father's assets. Yes, Brent said. I am a financial professional. I know how to manage an estate. Zhao nodded. He placed the black book on the railing of the witness stand. He opened it to a page marked with a red sticky note. Then, perhaps you can explain this entry from August 12, 2018, Zhao said. Brent looked at the book. He squinted. What is that? He asked. Zhao read from the page. His voice was clear and sharp. August 12th. Brent requested $20,000 for emergency home repairs due to a flood. Inspection of the home revealed no flood damage. Bank records show a transfer of $20,000 to an offshore gambling site on August 13th. The color drained from Brent's face. Objection, Thorne shouted, standing up. What is this book? Where did this come from? This, Zhao said, turning to the judge, is a detailed ledger kept by Lincoln Vance for 20 years. It documents every transaction, every loan, and every lie told by the plaintiff. And we have the bank records to back up every single entry. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. Continue, Mr. Zhao. Zhao turned the page. November 4th, 2020, Zhao read. Brent requested funds for a charity gala table, $10,000. Check was cashed at a liquor store in downtown Atlanta. No donation was ever made. Brent started to sweat. He pulled at his collar. That is not true, he stammered. That is a fabrication. He wrote that. He is crazy, remember? Zhao looked at Brent. He looked deep into his soul. We have the canceled check, Mr. Vance, and it has your signature on the back. I watched from my seat. I saw the confidence crumble. I saw the fear take hold. The first round of the fight was over, and the knockout punch was just beginning. The courtroom was silent after the revelation of the ledger, but the war was far from over. Brent Vance sat in the witness box, wiping sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. He looked at his lawyer Marcus Thorne, begging for a lifeline. Thorne stood up to object, claiming that the financial records were circumstantial, but Zhao was already moving to the next phase of the attack. Zhao did not sit down. He walked over to the large monitor that had been set up for the defense. He plugged in the black USB drive that I had left on the hospital bed. The same drive that had locked them out of the accounts was now about to lock them out of their dignity. Your Honor, Zhao said, his voice calm and steady. The plaintiffs claim that Lincoln Vance is paranoid. They claim his belief that his family is plotting against him is a delusion. We would like to present Exhibit B. This footage was recorded by the security system inside the Blue Ridge estate 3 weeks before Mr. Vance's heart attack. Brent froze. He knew about the cameras outside, but he did not know about the cameras inside. I had installed them myself, disguised as smoke detectors, not to spy on them, but to protect the house. I never expected to capture what I did. The screen flickered to life. The date stamp showed a Thursday afternoon. The camera angle showed the living room of the mansion. The room was bathed in sunlight. Kendra was not home. She was at her yoga class, but Brent was there, and he was not alone. Walking into the frame with him was a woman. The courtroom gasped. It was not a stranger. It was Jessica, Kendra's best friend since college. The woman who had been the maid of honor at their wedding. The woman who was currently sitting in the second row of the gallery, behind Kendra, having come to support her friend. On the screen, Brent and Jessica sat down on the sofa. Brent poured 2 glasses of my expensive scotch. He handed one to Jessica. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a long, passionate kiss that made the air in the courtroom turn ice cold. Kendra let out a strangled sound. She put her hands over her mouth. Her eyes darted from the screen to the back of the room, where Jessica was now shrinking down in her seat, trying to become invisible. But the video was not done. The audio was crisp and clear. I cannot wait much longer, Brent said on the screen, taking a sip of scotch. The old man is healthy as a horse. He is going to live forever and hold on to that money until he is 100. Jessica laughed. She ran her hand through Brent's hair. Just be patient, baby. Kendra says he has high blood pressure. Maybe we will get lucky, Brent sneered. Kendra. God, I am so sick of her. She is so needy. She spends money like water, but she has no idea how to make it. If it was not for her father's trust fund, I would have left her 5 years ago. I am only here for the payout, Jessica. Once the old man kicks the bucket and Kendra gets the inheritance, I am going to divorce her so fast her head will spin, and then it will be just you and me and $50 million. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was shattered by a scream that sounded like an animal in a trap. It was Kendra. She stood up so fast her chair fell over with a loud crash. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure fury. She did not look at the judge. She did not look at me. She looked at Brent, who was still sitting in the witness box looking like a ghost. You monster, Kendra screamed. You dirtbag. You slept with Jessica. She lunged. She did not run. She flew across the small space between the plaintiff's table and the witness stand. The bailiff was too slow to stop her. She threw herself onto Brent. Her nails dug into his face. She grabbed his expensive hair and pulled. You said you loved me, she shrieked, slapping him across the face. You said I was your queen. You were waiting for my dad to die. You wanted the money. Brent tried to shield his face. Get off me, you crazy witch, he yelled. Security, help me. Kendra turned her rage toward the gallery. She pointed a shaking finger at Jessica, who was trying to sneak out the back door. And you, Kendra screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "You sat at my dinner table. You held my hand when I cried about him working late. You knew. You both knew." The judge banged her gavel. "Order in the court. Bailiff, restrain the plaintiff immediately." Two bailiffs grabbed Kendra by the arms. She was kicking and screaming. Her perfectly curated life had exploded in front of a room full of strangers. She looked at me then. Her eyes were wild. "Daddy, did you know she cried? Did you know he was doing this?" I looked at her from my seat. I did not smile. I did not frown. "Yes," I said softly. "I tried to tell you last year, but you said I was just jealous of your happiness. So I let you see it for yourself." Kendra collapsed into the bailiff's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Brent sat in the witness box, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek. His reputation destroyed, his marriage over, and his secret exposed. The financial genius was revealed to be nothing but a gold-digging cheater. Zhao waited for Kendra to be escorted back to her seat and given a glass of water. The judge looked furious. This was no longer a conservatorship hearing. It was a reality show, and she had lost her patience. "Mr. Zhao," the judge said, her voice sharp, "do you have any more evidence, or can I dismiss this circus right now?" "Just one more piece of evidence, Your Honor," Zhao said. He turned his attention to Lucille. My wife was sitting next to Kendra, trying to comfort her daughter, but her eyes were darting around the room in panic. She realized the tide had turned. She realized Brent was useless. She realized her only hope was to play the victim card herself. Mr. Thorne sensed the danger. He stood up. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Lucille Vance, is an innocent party in this. Regardless of Mr. Brent Vance's indiscretions, Mrs. Vance is the legal wife of Lincoln Vance. She has been abandoned. She has been left destitute. Under state law, she is entitled to access to marital assets for her basic needs. We ask the court to order an immediate release of funds to Mrs. Vance." Zhao walked back to his desk. He opened a thin manila folder. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was yellowed with age. "Your Honor," Zhao said, "under normal circumstances, Mr. Thorne would be correct. However, Mrs. Vance seems to have forgotten a document she signed on May 5th, 2015. Lucille froze. She looked at the paper in Zhao's hand. Her mouth went dry. 10 years ago, she had gotten into trouble with a loan shark over a gambling debt. She had come to me crying, begging for help. I paid the $40,000 debt, but I told her that was the last time. I told her I would not let her drag the family into poverty. I made her sign an agreement. Zhao handed the document to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. "This is a notarized post-nuptial agreement," Zhao announced. "In exchange for Mr. Vance paying off her substantial gambling debts, Mrs. Lucille Vance agreed to a total separation of assets. Clause 4 states that in the event of a separation or dispute, Mrs. Vance waives all claims to the LJ Trust, the properties and the primary savings accounts. She agreed that she has no legal right to Mr. Vance's estate beyond what he voluntarily provides." Lucille stood up. Her legs were shaking. "No," she whispered. "That was just a formality. Lincoln told me it was just to scare off the loan sharks. He promised he would never use it." I looked at Lucille. I remembered that night. I remembered paying the man who threatened to break her legs. I remembered her crying and promising she would change. She never changed. She just got better at hiding it. "I never promised I would not use it, Lucille," I said. "I promised I would protect this family. And sometimes protecting the family means protecting it from you." Lucille sank back into her chair. She looked at Brent, who was looking at the floor. She looked at Kendra, who was still crying. She looked at the judge, who was reading the document with a stern expression. She realized then that her safety net was gone. She had spent 10 years thinking she was the queen of the chessboard, but she was just a pawn who had been sacrificed long ago. She had no money. She had no house. She had a husband who had finally stopped enabling her. The judge closed the folder. She took off her glasses. She looked at the three people sitting at the plaintiff's table. "I have heard enough," she said. Her voice cut through the room like a knife. "Mr. Vance, you may stand up." I stood up. My back did not hurt. My heart beat steady and strong. The judge looked at Brent. "Mr. Vance, your petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. There is absolutely no evidence that Lincoln Vance is incompetent. On the contrary, he appears to be the only person in this family who has any grasp of reality. You have wasted the court's time. You have perjured yourself, and you have attempted to weaponize the legal system to commit theft." She looked at Kendra. "Mrs. Vance, your eviction is upheld. The terms of the trust are clear. You violated the clause of care. You have no right to the property." She looked at Lucille. "Mrs. Vance, the postnuptial agreement is valid. You have no claim to the estate." The judge picked up her gavel. "Furthermore," she continued, "I am finding the plaintiffs liable for all legal fees incurred by the defendant. And Mr. Brent Vance, I am referring the transcript of this hearing and the video evidence to the district attorney's office for potential charges of fraud and elder abuse." She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Reporters who had snuck in were typing furiously on their phones. Brent put his head in his hands. Kendra stared blankly at the wall. Lucille looked at me one last time. Her eyes were pleading. She mouthed the word, "Please." I picked up my black ledger. I put it back in my canvas bag. I nodded to Zhao. We turned around and walked down the center aisle. I walked past my wife. I walked past my daughter. I walked past the son-in-law I had treated like my own blood. I did not stop. I did not look back. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cool and fresh. I walked out into the daylight. I was 68 years old. I had no wife. I had no children to call my own. But for the first time in 40 years, I was free. I took a deep breath. It tasted like justice. The gavel had banged in the courtroom, but the sentence was still being carried out in the streets. I went back to my farm and turned off my phone. I did not need to watch the fallout because I knew exactly how gravity worked. When you climb high on a ladder built of lies, the fall is long and the landing is brutal. My son Tyrell was the first to hit the ground. He had managed to get out of jail on a signature bond because the jails were overcrowded. A smart man would have kept his head down. A smart man would have gotten a job at a car wash and started paying his debts. But Tyrell was not a smart man. He was a man addicted to attention. He borrowed a phone from one of his so-called friends, and he did the only thing he knew how to do. He went live on social media. He sat on a curb outside the precinct. He made sure the lighting highlighted the dark circles under his eyes. He squeezed out a few fake tears. He started recording. He told the world that I was a tyrant. He said I was suffering from dementia and had abandoned my family in a fit of paranoia. He said his mother was sleeping on the street because of a clerical error at the bank. He asked for donations. He set up a crowdfunding page titled, "Help the Vance Family Survive Abuse." For about 2 hours it seemed to work. Strangers sent money. People commented saying how terrible I was. Tyrell smiled at the screen thinking he had won. He thought he could manipulate the court of public opinion just like he manipulated his mother. But he forgot that the internet has eyes everywhere. A nurse from St. Joseph's Hospital saw the video. She remembered the empty room. She remembered the rude phone calls. She posted a comment. "I was the charge nurse on floor 3. Your father was dying, and you told us not to call back because you were cutting a cake. You are not a victim. You are a predator." Then the paramedic chimed in. He posted a transcript of the ambulance call logs. He redacted my name, but the timestamp matched Tyrell's story perfectly. The tide turned instantly. The internet is a wild beast, and when it smells blood, it attacks. People found the court records from the hearing, which were public domain. They found the details of the eviction. They found the video of Brent cheating that had leaked from the courtroom evidence file. Tyrell's comment section became a war zone. People called him a parasite. They called him a leech. They made memes of his crying face superimposed over a picture of a cake. The hashtag #CakeOverDad started trending in Atlanta. The crowdfunding platform flagged his campaign for fraud. They froze the account and refunded every single donation. Tyrell watched the number go from $2,000 back down to 0 in real time. He tried to delete the video, but it was too late. It had been shared thousands of times. He walked down the street and people recognized him. They did not ask for his autograph. They threw sodas at him from passing cars. A group of teenagers filmed him walking in his dirty clothes and laughed. He ran into an alley to hide. He was not just broke, he was a social pariah. He had tried to destroy my reputation, and instead, he had incinerated his own. While Tyrell was hiding in an alley, Brent was learning a hard lesson about the corporate world. He had been fired from his firm. He had been blacklisted by the regulatory agencies. But he still had to eat. He still had to pay for the motel room if he wanted a place to sleep. He put on his wrinkled suit. He walked into a high-end steakhouse downtown. It was a place where we used to have family dinners on my dime. He asked to see the manager. He thought he could maybe get a job as a host or a bartender. He thought his charm still worked. The manager was a man named David. Brent had tipped him poorly for years. David looked at Brent. He looked at the stains on his shirt. He looked at the desperation in his eyes. "I am looking for a position," Brent said, trying to sound confident. "Management, consulting, even front of house. I have a lot of experience with high net worth clients." David picked up a newspaper from the hostess stand. He slapped it on the counter. On the front page was a sketch of Brent from the courtroom. The headline read, "The son-in-law who stole Christmas." "We do not hire thieves," David said loudly, "and we certainly do not hire men who cheat on their wives and abuse the elderly. Get out of my restaurant before I call the health inspector to report a piece of garbage in the lobby." Brent turned around. The diners were staring at him. He saw a former colleague from another firm sitting at table 4. The man quickly held up a menu to hide his face. Brent walked out into the heat. He went to a diner next, then a fast food joint, then a car wash. Nobody would hire him. His face was too famous, and his reputation was too toxic. Finally, he went to the back door of a Greasy Spoon diner. He asked to wash dishes for cash. The cook looked at him. He spat on the ground. "I saw what you did to that old man," the cook said. "My dad raised me on a construction site just like yours. If you were my son, I would have beaten you. I would not let you touch my dishes with your dirty hands. Move along." Brent sat on the curb. His stomach rumbled. He realized that money bought forgiveness, but he had no money. And without money, he was just a bad man in a bad suit with nowhere to go. Kendra fared no better. She tried to go to her yoga studio. She needed to center herself. She needed to pretend everything was normal. She walked in with her mat under her arm. The receptionist blocked her path. Kendra stopped. "What are you doing? I have a lifetime membership. Your father paid for that membership," the receptionist said, "and he canceled it yesterday. And frankly, Kendra, after what you did to him, we do not want you here. This is a place of peace. You bring chaos." Kendra turned to leave. She saw her group of friends sitting in the smoothie bar across the street. These were women she had vacationed with, women she had gossiped with. She waved at them, desperate for a friendly face. They looked at her. Then they looked at each other. Then they turned their backs. One of them pulled the blinds down. Kendra stood on the sidewalk alone. She took out her phone to text them. She saw that she had been removed from the group chat. She had been blocked on social media. She was not just evicted from her house. She was evicted from her life. She realized that her friends did not love her. They loved her father's credit card. And now that the card was gone, she was invisible. The most tragic figure in this play was Lucille, my wife, the woman who had slept beside me for 40 years. She was sitting in the motel room when the manager banged on the door. "Checkout time was 11, he shouted through the wood. "It is noon. You have not paid for another night. Get out." Lucille opened the door. Her eyes were red from crying. "Please," she begged. "My son is bringing money. He just needs a little more time." The manager looked past her into the messy room. He shook his head. "I saw your son on the news, lady. He is broke, and so are you. You have 5 minutes to clear out, or I am throwing your stuff on the sidewalk." Lucille packed her bag. It was a trash bag because the movers had taken her suitcases. She put in her few remaining clothes. She walked out of the room. She walked past the ice machine where she used to fill her bucket with champagne. She walked out into the parking lot. She began to walk. She did not know where she was going. Her feet hurt in her sandals. The sun beat down on her neck. She walked past a park. She saw an old couple sitting on a bench feeding birds. The man was peeling an orange for the woman. They looked poor, but they looked happy. Lucille stopped. She leaned against a fence. A memory hit her so hard it almost knocked her over. She remembered our first anniversary. We were broke. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I could not afford a gift, so I built her a jewelry box out of scrap wood. I polished it until it shone. She had cried when I gave it to her. She said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Where was that box now? She had thrown it away years ago when I bought her a gold one. She had thrown away the wood to make room for the gold. And now she had neither. She kept walking. She walked until she reached the downtown area. She passed a furniture store window. Inside, she saw a living room set that looked like the one in our mansion. She saw the plush velvet sofa. She saw the fake fireplace. She pressed her hand against the glass. She could almost feel the warmth. She remembered the nights I would rub her feet after a long day. She remembered how I would make her tea when she had a headache. She realized with a terrifying clarity that the warmth in that big house did not come from the furnace. It came from me. I was the fire in the hearth. I was the walls that kept the wind out. And she had spent 40 years trying to put out the fire. Now she had succeeded. She sat down on a bus stop bench. She pulled her knees to her chest. A cold wind blew through the city streets. It cut through her thin dress. She shivered. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine my arms around her. But all she felt was the hard metal of the bench and the bitter chill of absolute solitude. She was the queen of nothing, and her castle was made of air. It was a Tuesday night when the storm finally broke over Georgia. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the rain came down in sheets that rattled the tin roof of my farmhouse like 1,000 drumsticks. It was the kind of rain that cleans the earth, the kind of rain that forces you inside to seek warmth. I was sitting by the fire, reading a book on carpentry, when the motion sensor on the front gate triggered the floodlights. I walked to the window. Through the blur of the downpour, I saw a figure standing at the iron gate. It was a woman. She was not wearing a raincoat. She was wearing a thin cardigan that was soaked through in seconds. Her hair, which used to be sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull. She was shaking so hard I could see it from 50 yards away. It was Lucille. She did not scream. She did not shake the bars this time. She simply fell to her knees in the mud. The expensive Italian leather sandals she refused to part with sank deep into the red clay. She gripped the cold metal bars and pressed her forehead against them. I watched her for a long time. I watched her mouth move. I could not hear her over the thunder, but I knew what she was saying. I knew the script by heart, because I had heard it for 40 years. "Lincoln, please." I saw her look up at the house. She saw my silhouette in the window. She raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. "Lincoln, I am sorry," she screamed. Her voice was faint against the wind, but it carried the desperate pitch of a drowning woman. "I was wrong, Lincoln. I was so foolish. I got caught up in the money. I got caught up in the image. But I love you. We have been together since we were 20. Do not leave me out here in the cold. I have nowhere to go. The shelter is full. I have not eaten in 2 days." She wiped rain and tears from her face. "I remember the blue house, Lincoln," she cried. "I remember the truck. I remember when we had nothing and we were happy. I can be that woman again. Just open the gate. I will cook. I will clean. I will do anything. Just let me come home." It was a masterful performance. If I were a younger man, I might have believed it. If I were the man I was 6 months ago, I would have already been running out there with an umbrella. But the rain washes away dirt. It does not wash away character. And as I watched her kneeling in the mud, I noticed something. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the warm glow of the living room lamp behind me. She was not missing her husband. She was missing the heater. She was missing the refrigerator. She was missing the safety that I provided. She was sorry she lost the bet, not that she hurt the man. I stayed at the window. My hand rested on the cool glass. Inside the house it was dry. The fire crackled comfortably. The smell of cedar wood and roasted coffee filled the room. It was a sanctuary I had built for myself, a place of peace that I had fought a war to secure. Out there in the dark was the woman who had been my world. My heart gave a painful throb. It was a phantom ache, a muscle memory of love. Part of me wanted to press the button. Part of me wanted to bring her in and dry her off and pretend that none of this had happened. It is a terrible thing to watch the person you spent your life with reduced to a beggar at your gate. It goes against every instinct of a protector. It goes against the vows we took. But then I closed my eyes, and another image flashed in my mind. I saw the white ceiling of the ambulance. I felt the crushing weight on my chest. I tasted the plastic of the oxygen mask. I heard the paramedic pleading with her on the phone, and I heard her voice. Not the desperate voice calling from the rain, but the cold, annoyed voice from the party. "We are cutting the cake." That sentence was the lock on the gate. If the roles were reversed, would she be standing at the window? If I had gambled away our fortune and left her destitute, would she open the door? The answer was a cold, hard no. She would have left me in the rain without a second thought, because to Lucille, people were only valuable as long as they were useful. I was no longer useful. I was just the gatekeeper to the comfort she felt entitled to. Reason is a cold companion, but it is a faithful one. I realized that opening that gate would not be an act of mercy. It would be an act of suicide. If I let her in, I would not be saving her. I would be enabling the very poison that destroyed our family. She needed to feel the rain. She needed to know that actions have consequences that cannot be fixed with a tearful apology. I turned away from the window. I walked to the hallway table. Sitting there was a manila envelope I had prepared days ago, knowing this moment would come. I picked it up. It felt light, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. I called for Sam. He was staying in the guest cottage, helping me with the security. He came in wearing his raincoat, holding a flashlight. "Is it time?" Sam asked, looking at the envelope. "It is time," I said. "Do you want to talk to her?" Sam asked. "No," I said. "If I talk to her, I might falter, and I cannot afford to falter." Sam took the envelope. He understood. He did not judge me. He had seen the scars on my soul. He nodded and stepped out into the storm. I went back to the window, but I stood back in the shadows so she could not see me. I watched Sam walk down the driveway. His flashlight cut a beam through the darkness. Lucille saw him coming. She stood up. Hope flooded her face. She smoothed her wet hair. She thought Sam was coming to unlock the gate. She thought she had won again. She thought that a few tears were all it took to manipulate Lincoln Vance. Sam stopped at the gate. He did not unlock it. He reached through the bars. Lucille's face fell. She looked at Sam's hands. There was no key. There was only the envelope. "Mr. Vance wanted you to have this," Sam shouted over the wind. Lucille took the envelope with trembling hands. She tore it open, desperate to see a check. She wanted to see a routing number. She wanted to see a key to a condo. She pulled out the contents. It was a single Greyhound bus ticket, one way, destination Tallahassee, Florida. And stapled to the ticket was a brochure. The cover read, "Sunshine State Homeless Coalition, Rehabilitation and Job Placement Center." Lucille stared at the ticket. She looked up at Sam. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "What is this?" she screamed. "A bus ticket. He is sending me away on a bus." There was a note inside, too. I had written it that morning. Sam shone his flashlight on the paper so she could read it. Lucille held the note up to the light. The ink was starting to run from the rain, but the message was clear. "You wanted independence, Lucille. Here it is. Florida has a lower cost of living and plenty of entry-level jobs in the hospitality industry. You are 66 years old, but you are healthy. You have 2 hands. Use them. Do not come back to Atlanta. There is nothing for you here but memories you failed to honor. Stand on your own. It is the only gift I have left to give you." Lucille crushed the note in her hand. She screamed a sound of pure, primal rage. It was not the cry of a heartbroken wife. It was the shriek of a parasite that had been ripped from its host. "I am his wife," she yelled at Sam. "He cannot do this to me." "He just did," Sam said calmly. "The bus leaves at 6 in the morning from the downtown depot. I suggest you start walking. It is a long way." Sam turned around and walked back toward the house. Lucille stood there, gripping the cold iron bars. She looked at the house one last time. She looked at the warm window. She realized that the glass was unbreakable, the lock was unpickable, and the man inside was no longer the Lincoln she could control. She looked at the bus ticket. It was humiliating. It was harsh, but it was also a lifeline. It was the only option she had left. Slowly defeated, she turned away from the gate. She clutched the envelope to her chest to keep it dry. She began to trudge back down the muddy driveway toward the dark road. Her shoulders were slumped. Her expensive sandals were ruined. I watched her go until the darkness swallowed her up. I did not feel happy. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a deep, profound sadness. But beneath the sadness was peace. The storm outside was raging, but the storm inside my house was finally over. I walked over to the fireplace and threw another log on the flames. The sparks flew up the chimney, joining the wind outside. I was alone, but I was warm. And for tonight, that was enough. The smell of fresh cedar sawdust is the best perfume in the world. It smells better than the imported cologne Brent used to bathe in. It smells better than the stale air of the courtroom. It smells like honest work. I stood in the middle of the large workshop I had built on the edge of my property. Sunlight streamed through the skylights, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Around me were 20 young men. They were not my biological children. They were boys from the inner city, boys who had dropped out of school, boys who had records, boys who reminded me of myself before I found construction. "Mr. Lincoln," a voice called out. "I think I messed up the dovetail joint." I walked over to the workbench. It was Marcus. He was 19 years old and had spent 2 years in juvenile detention for theft. He looked at me with fear in his eyes, expecting me to yell, expecting me to tell him he was useless. I picked up the piece of wood. I ran my thumb over the rough edge. "You did not mess it up, Marcus," I said. "You just rushed it. You were thinking about the finish line instead of the journey. Patience is a tool, just like the chisel. If you force the wood, it cracks. If you guide it, it bends." I took the chisel and showed him the angle. He watched me with an intensity that Tyrell never had. Tyrell would have hired someone to cut the wood for him. Marcus wanted to learn how to cut it himself. That was the difference between entitlement and character. I stepped back and watched the workshop hum with activity. This was the Lincoln Vance Foundation. 1 year ago, I had walked out of that courtroom a free man. The first thing I did was liquidate the LJ Trust. I sold the office buildings. I sold the commercial strips. I sold the stocks. I gathered a fortune that had taken me 40 years to build, and then I gave 80% of it away. I funded this workshop. I funded scholarships for trade schools. I funded a legal defense fund for the elderly. I kept enough to live comfortably on my farm, to buy groceries, and to keep my truck running. But the millions that had poisoned my family were gone. I had drained the swamp so the mosquitoes could not breed. A reporter from the Atlanta Journal came to interview me last month. She asked me if I regretted giving away my empire. She asked if I missed the power. I told her the truth. I told her that power is not having a big bank account. Power is waking up in the morning and knowing that nobody wants you dead for your money. Power is eating a sandwich in peace. Power is looking in the mirror and liking the man you see. The workshop whistle blew at 5 o'clock. The boys cleaned up their stations. They shook my hand as they left. They called me Mr. Lincoln with genuine respect, not because they wanted a payout, but because I gave them a future. I locked up the shop and walked back to the main house. The Georgia evening was cool. The crickets were starting their nightly song. My knees ached a little, but it was a good ache. It was the ache of a day well spent. I walked into the kitchen. On the oak table sat a small pile of mail. I did not get many bills anymore because my life was simple, but there were 2 envelopes that stood out. One was a plain white envelope with a stamp from the Georgia Department of Corrections. The return address was a cell block number. The handwriting was jagged and angry. It was from Tyrell. The other envelope was pink. It smelled faintly of lavender. The handwriting was cursive and looped. It was from Kendra. The return address was a small apartment complex on the south side of the city, a place known for cheap rent and thin walls. I picked up Tyrell's letter. I could feel the thickness of the paper. It was probably 5 pages long. I knew what it would say without opening it. He would say he found God. He would say he was sorry. He would say he needed money for the commissary because the other inmates were bullying him. He would say he was innocent. He would blame the judge. He would blame the lawyer. He would blame me. I put it down. I picked up Kendra's letter. I held it up to the light. I could see a photograph inside. It was probably a picture of her looking sad and thin. She would tell me that her friends had abandoned her. She would tell me that working at a diner was hard on her feet. She would ask for a small loan just to get back on her feet. She would promise to pay me back. I walked over to the stone fireplace in the living room. A fire was already crackling in the grate, casting a warm orange glow on the rug. For a moment I hesitated. These were my children. The blood in their veins was half mine. Society tells us that a father's love should be unconditional. Society tells us that we should always forgive. But society does not live in my house. Society did not lie on that hospital gurney while my heart stopped. I realized that reading these letters would not help them. It would only feed the cycle. If I read them, I might feel guilty. If I felt guilty, I might send money. If I sent money, they would never learn to survive. They would never become like Marcus in the workshop, learning to cut the wood themselves. I tossed Tyrell's letter into the fire. It landed on a burning log. The corner caught fire instantly. The paper curled and blackened. The words of a thief turned into smoke and rose up the chimney. I tossed Kendra's letter in next. The pink envelope flared up bright and hot. The lavender scent was replaced by the smell of burning paper. I watched the photograph inside disintegrate. I watched the excuses turn to ash. I did not feel sad. I felt clean. I had not abandoned them. I had released them. I had given them the dignity of consequences. A knock came at the door. I turned away from the fire. "Come in," I called out. The door opened and Zhao walked in. He was carrying a bottle of aged bourbon and two heavy crystal glasses. He looked older than he did a year ago, but his smile was just as sharp. "I saw smoke coming from the chimney," Zhao said, closing the door against the night air. "I thought you might be celebrating." "Every day is a celebration, Zhao," I said. He walked over to the table and poured 2 drinks. He handed one to me. We walked out onto the back porch and sat in the rocking chairs. The moon was full, hanging low over the pine trees. "I heard about Brent," Zhao said, taking a sip. "He is working at a car wash in Alabama, living in a trailer. He tried to sue his former firm for wrongful termination, but no lawyer would take the case." "And Lucille?" I asked. I did not look at him. I looked at the moon. "She is in Florida," Zhao said. "She is working as a greeter at a large retail store. She shares a small apartment with 2 other women. She is surviving." "Lincoln, she is actually working." I nodded. It was good. She was finally earning her bread. She was finally living a real life. Zhao looked at me. "Do you ever miss it, Lincoln? The parties, the mansion, the feeling of being the king of the clan." I took a long, slow sip of the bourbon. It burned pleasantly on its way down. I looked out at the dark woods. I thought about the emptiness of the big house. I thought about the silence of the hospital room. And then I thought about the workshop full of boys who wanted to learn. I thought about the peace of my evenings. "I miss nothing, Zhao," I said. "I spent 40 years building a castle on sand. It washed away. Now I am building on rock." I raised my glass to him. "To family," Zhao said. I shook my head. "No, Zhao," I said. "Not to family. Family is an accident of biology. You do not choose your family." I clinked my glass against his. The sound rang out clear and true in the night air. "To loyalty," I said. "To the people who show up when the music stops. To the people who stay when the money is gone. To the people who respect you enough to tell you the truth." We drank. The bourbon was warm. The night was quiet. I was Lincoln Vance. I was a carpenter. I was a teacher. I was a friend. And as I sat there rocking on the porch of the home I had made for myself, I knew that I was finally the richest man in the world. The screen fades to black. Through this journey, I learned that true generosity is not about giving people what they want, but giving them the independence they need. For years, I thought I was loving my family by shielding them from the world, but I was only crippling them. Real love requires boundaries. I discovered that you cannot buy loyalty, and you cannot build a home on the quicksand of entitlement. Peace is not found in a crowded mansion full of strangers who share your last name. It is found in the quiet integrity of your own choices. It is better to be alone with your dignity than surrounded by people who are waiting for you to die. If you believe that respect must be earned and not just given, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are listening from. I would love to connect with you. And if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against the people you love, share this story. You are not alone. See you in the next video.